Hi, I'm Mike Stokes with Wildlife Living, and today's video is how to take care of your knees, especially if you've ever injured them. A little bit about my story. When I was 21, around 21 in 1989, I was playing recreational basketball, and I went up for a left-handed layup, and this knee right here, when I stepped down, it buckled in and bent sideways the way your knee's not supposed to bend, and I ripped out, completely tore out my ACL. At that point, my doctor advised me not to get it operated on, so I never had an ACL until 2006 when I had a cadaver ACL put in place. And that whole time, I did a lot of outdoor activities, hiking, biking, surfing, mainly surfing. So over the years, I've developed a program of how to take care of your knees so that they'll last for the long term. In 2006, unfortunately, the doctors removed my meniscus, so I have no meniscus, no cushions in my right knee. And in 2015, I injured my left knee surfing. So knee care has become a very big part of my life. One thing that I just basically gave up was running. Running just didn't seem to, it seemed to be so hard on the knees that it just wasn't worth it. Instead, I'll bike or hike. Downhill hikes, I like to use trekking poles, super important. So that's a little bit about my story. The first thing I want to talk about is your hips. So most people don't realize that when you think of your knees, they don't start thinking of your hips. But if you think of your hips are like a gyroscope. You have, this is what your femur bone looks like, and then it goes into your hip socket like this. And it can literally move in 365 degrees directions. So, you know, obviously your hip can go in any direction like that, right? So our hips tend to get really tight, and especially when we sit down a lot, they just get bunched up like that. So one of the first things that I do is hip openers. One of the things I really like is an inversion swing. So go ahead and refocus the camera over here. So this inversion swing, really simple setup, just a piece of plumbing insulation, a couple of really big eye bolts through a beam, and some carabiners, and then I'll go upside down in this hip opener. And this hip opener will then counteract if you're sitting in your car. When you're sitting in your car, you're constantly pushing this way, so we're always sitting at desks and cars pushing this way, and this pushes and opens the hips that way. And so then I usually do a hip opener like this with my legs spread out that way, and it's good to flex your toes because then that starts to protect the knee joint. So that's one of the things that I do to protect the knee, is to do hip openers, especially inversion swing. So, refocus and focus down on the ground. The next thing I want to talk about is lunges. So I do a lot of lunges, even when, for example, when I'll do an incline treadmill, I will do lunging walks on the incline treadmill. So, if you look at my knee's at a right angle. If you take your knee, I'm not even going to do it, if you take your knee past a right angle and you weight bear on it, that's a ton of pressure on the joint and really is hard on the knee joint. So don't do that. Always keep my knee straight on top of my heel. And then I try to lunge out, and again, open the hips, especially these hip flexors in the front. If you can see my heel's on top of my toes, and my back leg is flexing, my knee's right on top. So lunges are really good for your knee health. Another thing that's really good for your knee health are, we can just call them tippy toe exercises. So just when you go up and down on your tippy toes. Sometimes I'll do one leg. I'll just do it like this, if this knee is feeling compromised. So that's another one. Another thing that is super critical is, you can't see this, but it says MSM. I take MSM daily. You can see I'm totally committed to it. This is a 60-pound bucket that I bought. So I take about a tablespoon a day of MSM, sometimes a little bit less. And this changed my life forever when it comes to joint health. I broke my neck, I have a lower back slip disc, the knee, elbow, shoulder. That has cured me along with all the daily exercises that I do. Another thing that's super important to think about is this idea called what I call good pain, bad pain. So when you feel, and joint pain is almost always bad pain. So when I feel a pain in my joint, that is indicating that I'm doing something that's harming the joint. When I feel a pain across a muscle band that I normally don't feel pain on, that's a good pain. So you want to really focus on as much good pain as you can to stretch and strengthen, and as little joint pain as possible, as little sharp pain. So bad pain is almost always sharp, and a good pain is almost always long and stretched out across the muscle. So if we go back to this idea of doing a lunge, I feel a really tightness in here. It's painful, but I always feel a real tightness in here, and then a little bit of a weakness in my front leg. If I change legs, I actually have a lot less tightness on my right thigh. So that's another principle to really think about when you're trying to care for your knees, is the hip balance. So in my particular body, I have an inguinal hernia on my left side, so that makes my left hip always tighter. So I'm always focusing more stretching on my left hip than on my right hip. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. So you want to see, is it that your right leg is tighter than your left, or are your hip flexor muscles tighter, or are your hamstrings tighter? Wherever that tightness is, you want to work that gyroscope in the hip so that all those muscles are evenly stretched and strengthened. So it's important to stretch the front and the hip flexors, and then stretching the back is a little bit trickier when it comes to the knee. So angle the camera down on the ground. I'm just going to rip my belt off to do this. This is the safest way to stretch out your hamstrings. And then, so when you're doing hamstring stretch, this is going to be your safest hamstring stretch. Forward bends can be dangerous. I'm real sensitive to it because I have a slipped lower disc, so I don't even do them. If you look at my right leg, I'm pulling the inner thigh down as I'm stretching and flexing the toes and the heel up in the air, because I really want to get a muscular stretch. So you don't just stretch, tense your muscles while you're stretching, and that'll help protect the knee. So I'm not pushing too far back to try to overextend the knee. I'm keeping all this flexed. And then again, this side for me is always tighter, so I will focus more on that side. So that's it. I'm going to make one more video today, and that's going to explain all of these knee braces. If you're into extreme sports like I am, surfing or otherwise, I got some recommendations for you. So thanks for watching, and have a great day. I hope that was helpful. Please subscribe.